Hi gardeners, we have some exciting things happening in the garden and I really wanted to show you guys. So come join me so you guys could see what's happening in the garden. So I walked out in the garden this morning and realized 2 out of the 4 plants are starting to develop a really nice cauliflower head. I was super excited and really happy to see that, because last time I grew cauliflower, it was kind of successful, but I did not know we had to cover our cauliflowers, which is something I'll be discussing later on in the video. So while looking back and reflecting on the growth of the cauliflower, I realized that some gardeners tend to move away from brassicas and cauliflower in general because it can be a little bit more difficult to grow, because they are a little bit of a more pick-me plant and they only require some certain things. Especially you have to be more persistent when they're developing their vegetable. So in this video, I wanted to dedicate it all about cauliflower, on how you can see seed growing at it. I'll be discussing about some grow tips and later on what you should do when your cauliflower is producing its vegetable. So let's go ahead and jump right into it. So coming at number 1 has to be how much sunlight that they need to be receiving in order to give you guys the best performance ever. So any type of brassica out there prefers to have 5 to 6 plus hours of direct sunlight in order to give you guys the best performance ever. Cauliflower in particular loves the sun, which ties into our next topic, which discuss about the particular location you have to plant them in order for them to succeed and perform the best. So moving on to our next point is the type of soil that they have to be planted in. So brassicas in general can be kind of adaptable to most soil types out there, and it's recommended to amend the soil when it's time to transplant them with an organic matter like compost or earthworm castings. But the main key component when it comes to the type of soil that they're growing in is how much water they're retaining. So brassicas in general do not like to sit in water. They are not bog plants. And actually, some of the most common issues I'm seeing with gardeners growing brassicas nowadays is that they're either planting them in areas that retains too much moisture for them, or they're giving them way too much water, which we'll be discussing about in our next point. So when it comes to amending your soil, something I always recommend is aerating your soil with perlite, because that component adds air into the soil and it doesn't allow your soil to get compacted, and it allows your soil to be well draining. So perlite is definitely a component to keep in consideration when it comes to amending your soil with the other fun stuff. So make sure you plant your cauliflower in an area that receives full sun and that is well draining but retains slight moisture for them not to dry out as often. So coming in number 3 has to be a proper watering schedule. You have to have a proper watering schedule that is accommodated based on your growing area. Like here in South Florida, it's really humid in the morning, as well as it tends to rain almost every week. Especially when we move into our hurricane season, it tends to rain almost every day. So we're able to completely not water our brassicas at all because nature does it for us. If you live in a drought area, something I would recommend is watering 2 to 3 times per week, because that will allow your watering schedule to be more firm and more accommodated, as well as it will allow your brassicas to not wilt as often and they will stay constantly moist like they love to be. Something I always realize is that gardeners tend to overwater when it comes to brassicas. So definitely check on what type of area you live in. If you live in a drought area, if you live in a humid area, in a tropical area, definitely try to figure out what accommodated watering schedule you could have for your brassicas, since brassicas can be a little bit picky when it comes to watering. Coming at number 4 has to be their fertilizing schedule. Like brassicas and cabbage and Brussels sprouts and broccoli, etc., you name it, they all require some type of heavy nutritious value because they're all heavy feeders. Especially like the ones that produce heads like broccoli, as well as cauliflower and cabbage. Those produce huge canopies. Those require those huge leaves in order to sustain that nice vegetable that we enjoy. So in order to achieve that, we have to give them the proper components in order to achieve that goal that they're trying to get. So something I always recommend is to amend your soil in the beginning with some organic matter, and later on in the middle of the season, you mix in some organic matter so they can have a constant feed. Always when it comes to growing your own food, it's always best to keep the synthetic fertilizers away and always using organic compost or using organic earthworm castings. Always go with organic compost or organic components, because that works best when it comes to growing your own food, because it gives the best performance ever. So always amend your soil with organic components, either in the beginning when you transplant them and later around in their mid-season when they're starting to grow better leaves, getting a little bit bigger. Don't fertilize when they're producing their head, because that's way too late. So fertilize early on in the stage and midway through their growing season. So coming into our fifth and final point has to be something we all dread experiencing, which is the pests and diseases when it comes to cauliflower. Here I have a lower leaf of a cauliflower that is completely infested with aphids, and it's just been suffering. And although I was able to capture it easier and now it's under control, I wanted to show you guys the common pests and diseases that hit brassicas, which are aphids. So something to take in consideration when it comes to treating pests or diseases or how to avoid them is, number one, is to do proper spacing. Because what aphids and other pests and diseases look for is to see if there's shade and humidity. If that's provided with you cramming these plants together, especially how big they are, they will have a breeding ground of these aphids and other pests and diseases because you didn't space them properly. On the other hand, if you space them properly, there's air circulation going in and out, and there's no type of dark spaces at all as well. So make sure you do proper spacing. Number two is when it comes to watering, I would recommend to water at the base. Don't try to water the leaves, because that will introduce like blight, powdery mildew, because it could stay humid in there and you don't want that to attract anything. So when you water at the base. Number three is if you see early signs like this, try to remove the most infected leaves if they're in the lower. If not, go ahead and spray. If you're a type of gardener that likes to spray things, then you can go ahead and use an organic spray to douse your cauliflower and brassicas in. Or if you're an organic gardener like me, you could use water and soap-based solutions or milk and water-based solutions. Or in general, we could plant host plants that allow the aphids and other pests to attract to those host plants. And once they accumulate in there and they leave our brassicas alone, we throw those host plants away and enjoy our broccoli or whatever brassica we're growing. So that's gonna be it for this exciting sprouting video, you guys. May God bless you and your entire family, and never forget to grow big, ultimate gardeners. Bye, guys.